Hello. I am here with a person that you have never seen before. My friend JT from college. Uh,
Hey there.
if you want to, I don't know, say anything about how we know each other or anything.
Well, you said college. I mean
Hmm.
that like we're friends, artistic collaborators, on a good day lovers.
Lovers, yeah, I was gonna
Um,
say.
um, yeah, no. You and I go way back, Timmy.
Yeah, yeah. So we are here to talk about a new Netflix documentary miniseries that came out last week, which is called Epstein Filthy Rich, about Jeffrey Epstein and his cabal of child sex traffickers. Before we get too deep into it, though, I do want to take the opportunity to plug the extended clip episode that I was in that went up today. It's JT's podcast with two of his buddies. I was on it, recorded the episode a couple weeks ago. It went up today. We talk about Office Space and Speed Racer, so if you're interested in that, I will put the link to that in the description of this video. So I guess let's start talking about uh, like I said before we started the recording, for people who may not be as intimately familiar with Epstein land as we are, giving a little bit of backstory of who Epstein is, why it matters to talk about him, and then I'm sure we can find a nice way to segue into talking about the actual doc. But how would you start that
Yeah.
explanation?
I guess for me, I feel like Epstein is sort of the tear. He's the glitch in the powerful global pedophile cabal that
Yeah.
like the people had access to and is able, like, I don't know, he's for a lot of people, and like a lot of people who get into like conspiratorial thinking, I think it starts with something that's like believable enough that it's like, okay, the wealthy are controlling things in some manner and can pretty much get away with anything. I mean, things relatively grounded in truth. And then, like Epstein, like, I mean, while I do buy into most of the conspiracy stuff, like all conspiracies, because you'll never really know, there is a bunch of lore that gets created around that. But essentially, Epstein was a financier who emerged from relatively nothing with pretty shady claims and started handling rich people's money, like Les Wexner of Victoria's Secret, just sort of out of nowhere.
Who I think we should note, and the documentary weirdly does not spend a whole lot of time on this, which we will get to. Um, but the incredibly strange and unprecedented nature of the relationship between Epstein and Les Wexner. Um, to just give some backstory, if I remember correctly, Wexner is the conduit through which he acquired like his Manhattan residence, his private plane, his private island, all of that with the finances of L Brands. I That might not be, but I know that at least some of his properties came from that. And Wexner in the '90s gave Epstein power of attorney, and he could write his name on any financial transaction through L Brands or through Les Wexner's personal account. Um, Meanwhile, he was, recruiting with Wexner's knowledge, we can assume, recruiting, procuring young girls through the Victoria's Secret model program, that he would then come back and do the normal sort of rigmarole, which this documentary goes into quite a bit of detail about, of the routine of recruitment of these young girls. It was usually people in the Palm Beach area of Florida, and they would usually girls who were on sort of hard times or needed some money, and basically they would just be told, we'll pay you $200 and you massage old guys. And they would quickly find out that the person they were massaging was Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, his at one time girlfriend and partner in crime, would also usually be there, and they would soon find out that it was much more than a massage usually that was being expected of them. And for the truly desperate and victimized of them, such as Virginia Roberts, it would escalate to, I want to say cartoonish, but that makes it seem like it's funny, which it isn't, but just, like, unbelievable, like, conspiratorial and sadistic, like, exploitation of people, especially on the private island.
I mean, I think with, like, the level of sadism in the acts, it's just, like, I mean, cartoonish is kind of apt in the sense where it's, like, it's the evil of, like, a supervillain that, like, knows he's completely going to get away with it.
Yes.
Like, the evil and, like, manipulation in Epstein's acts, there's, like, a level of arrogance and sloppiness where it's just like, oh, I'm not going to be held accountable for any of these. And, like, by and large, like, he fucking wasn't. Like, he was able to do this for years, like, go unharmed. Even, like, I mean, the documentary focuses on the initial sentencing of Epstein, the sweetheart deal he got, and then the revived, like, public interest in the Epstein case leading into his suicide. But, like, even with that, it gets off pretty easy.
Yeah, for sure. I guess let's just get into talking any other sort of details about Epstein that we could want to tell people. I'm sure we'll get into just by talking about the doc. So, this doc, it's 4 episodes long. Each one is an hour. And I would say that probably the first 2, so like a good half of the series, is really just victim testimony. Then after that, the 3rd episode is kind of, if I remember correctly, is where it gets more into the plea deal, like you said, in 2008, where Alex Acosta, the U.S. attorney at the time, he basically gave him a completely unprecedented plea deal where for the level of evidence of sex offending and sex trafficking that they had on him, where I don't even remember what his sentence was. It was, 13 months or something? And
yeah, the charges that he went down for, I think, were explicitly, I mean, it was like prostitution, and then I think it was like
soliciting prostitution of a minor, which does not carry a huge sentence, and it made it so he did not have to register himself as a sex offender.
And just like with that, I mean, in the details of like his prison sentence, it's like that's a pretty liberal term for what it was. He was like allowed to leave like 6 days a week.
12 hours a day.
12 hours a day for like, and like oftentimes would like break the rules of that where it's like you have to be in a specific place.
He would go to his island for days at a time.
And it was like this cavalier attitude where it was like supposedly under the guise of work. But like, I mean, that's one thing that they don't get into the whole Epstein stuff and the broader level of conspiracy where it's like the documentary. I mean, I think throughout we'll talk about like, I mean, I think I mostly had problems with this. I mean, the victim testimony, I think, is the most compelling part that you get from all of this. But even that's been sort of butchered. But, like, the broader implications of, like, what Epstein was at, like, are, like, left out here.
Yeah, and I think that's probably going to be the sort of operant theme of our discussion of it, assuming that we have similar thoughts about it, which I feel like we probably do.
Yeah, I think so.
like for one example is I was very surprised that when they were talking about the plea deal in 2008 with Alex Acosta, they didn't like shy away from a lot of the details of that case. But the one thing that they didn't mention is what I think is what makes that whole deal even more frightening, because I feel like this doc wants it to be a story. They want it to be like another Harvey Weinstein story, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
it's really just about like he's a guy in a position of power and he has money, so he gets away with it a lot until he doesn't. But Epstein's very different. Like Epstein was, as we said, like was not the main character of what he was involved with. You know, he was like not just doing it for himself. In other words, he was the procurer for several pretty well-known people, including two U.S. presidents and Prince Andrew, which that's a good part in the doc when they talk about Prince Andrew
Oh yeah, for
and
sure.
his blubbering interview that he did last year about how he can't sweat. So
Yeah,
Virginia
it could have
Roberts
been
is
him.
lying because she mentioned him sweating on her. But the one thing in the plea deal that they don't mention that is the fact that the reason Alex Acosta agreed to the plea deal is because he was told that Epstein was an intelligence agent. And that's the sort of, this sort of thing, or like they mention his passports, how he had a bunch of different passports with different names. They don't mention that one of them is a Saudi passport. So, like, and, any number of other connections to powerful people that he had. They don't really go into too much detail about that. That's sort of the realm of conspiratorial thinking of, was Epstein a Mossad agent or FBI or something? And, like, I'm not really going to speculate about that. But, I mean, I think the fact that Acosta was told that, and that's why he needed this plea deal, I think is a pretty significant element of the story.
Yeah, absolutely. They snip out like a bunch of like whatever the broader like reality is, whether it is Epstein is just some procurer in in this pedophile cabal, whether he is getting intelligence for the Americans, the Israelis, like whatever. It like I don't know. This doc by and large paints him as like the smooth talking like kind of manipulator, which I feel like is not true to the story, especially with, I mean, we mentioned Les Wexner earlier. The way I really hate how Wexner comes up in this, because I've listened to a lot of interviews with Maria Farmer, who is like in this doc and has
Mm,
since like denounced her like participation. I think like
yeah.
most of the victims have.
At
Um,
least a few of them.
but like she mentions Wexner in particular, her the assault that happened to Farmer, I believe, was at Wexner's estate. Like he was like completely aware and like participating in this. But the way the documentary frames it is it's like he Epstein was willing to like sort of like cuddle up to Wexner
Right,
and like
right,
through like gay relations
right.
was able to get like stuff like that's why
They act
they
like
assumes
that
that
he was just taking Wexner for a ride,
yeah,
and
yeah,
yeah,
exactly. And it's like that's totally like I don't know. I mean, especially like victim testimony. I think like a few people mention Wexner and it's you can't like just snip this portion out to make a clean story of how like oh man, it's just this wealthy powerful person Epstein because they don't really go much into Epstein's backstory at all other
yeah.
than just sort of like him coming up through like education. He lied a little bit, but it's just like he just sort of still falls into all this money, and they don't like what like. I mean, admittedly, not a lot of the facts are there, but I think it's the speculation that has been going on about it is extremely useful because
Yeah.
it's you don't become like a fucking billionaire overnight by just being like some slick talking asshole who's
Yeah,
able to manipulate
by
people.
being really good at math, which itself is a disputed fact, but
Mhm.
um yeah, that was really weird to me and surprising to me how little they really talked about, like, where did he get this money? And I mean, like I said, with Wexner in particular, his, collaboration with Wexner and his financial relationship to L Brands is a big part of what gave him the, like, property that he used to, like, expand this empire of sex trafficking. Um, and it's just very weird to not explore that at all. And like you said, like, once you get into the stuff of, well, why did Epstein go from, like, teaching at this, school to being at, like, the top, like, investment person at fucking Bear Stearns? Like, where was that? What made that leap happen? Um, because, I think it's pretty safe to say, with maybe some notable exceptions, that you don't really get rich in this country if people don't want you to. If
Mhm.
the people who pull the strings don't want that, like, and that's the thing that I don't like about the stock, is that it is very much trying to make it seem like this is a story about just Jeffrey Epstein. That
Mhm.
this is a story about a guy who, I mean, don't get me wrong, like, the doc, like, mentions other elites, like, being involved in the assaults and everything. So, like, the connection to power is not in dispute, but the nature of that connection, the implications of that, are not really explored at all. Um, and shit, I'm
What
trying to remember.
particularly like it like exonerates like Bill Clinton in it. Like they have
Yeah,
one of the victims say that like they don't think Bill Clinton was ever a part of it. But like and they do like a little like one of the after titles says Bill Clinton's denies ever being on Epstein's island or like
yeah.
whatever. But like the frequency that like the that we actually know that he went to the island was like pretty often. Like I just I mean, obviously, a documentary produced by Netflix is not going to go full guns out
Right,
to the rich and powerful.
right.
But I mean, that's like I don't know, that's a fucking problem. It's like you can't like talk about Epstein, and like I don't know, that for me bleeds into another main critique I have, where it's just like the presentation of it all like is I mean I was expecting like when I heard like a Netflix Epstein doc was in the works that it wasn't going to be like formally anything inventive and like with things of this grave of importance I don't think it necessarily matters like the presentation isn't too valuable to me but
Hmm.
there's something that feels like really like exploitation
It's
in
very
this
artificial.
like seeing Jeffrey Epstein's face in a really slick Netflix like title credits just feels like inappropriate to me.
Well, yeah,
It's just like that part like feel like that it's just like it's this is just another true crime thing
right, yeah,
flavor of the week for people to gobble up and like just
right,
fucking like move on.
right. Well, yeah, that's what I was getting at with the fact that it tries to make it a singular story about Epstein the person, that, like, it's just another, like, wealthy white guy that got to the top and then abused his power. Um, and it doesn't really want to dig deeper in any questions. And, maybe I'm getting really conspiratorial here, but it almost feels like this doc was produced as a sort of, like, capture and kill for any, like, grander sort of implications that people might draw from the Epstein case.
No, I
um
mean I totally buy that. I mean it's like if you do like outside research, like even the slightest bit, like I'm not like the biggest Epstein head there is, but I've been
Right.
following the case for like a long fucking time now.
Yeah.
I've like the it's who's the other Virginia? There wasn't Virginia Roberts. It's Virginia Guffrey, I
That's the
think.
same person.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Shit, she got married. So,
Yeah.
um, she like I followed her on Twitter for a long time, and I think has expressed like dissatisfaction with what she has said. Like Maria Farmer, in like she was on Tim Dillon's podcast. Like a clip with Whitney Webb. She was on TrueAnon, which I mean, talking about actually legitimate Epstein resources. I know
Right.
they've branched out into other subjects now, but like that's a gold mine there. But
Mm-hmm.
like they all talk about Epstein just being the tip of the iceberg, and like that they're like part of the reason why the victims are so willing to come forward, and why I think like these women are doing like some of the most like brave fucking work out there, is because they're like telling the full story, saying that it doesn't end with Epstein, and that like they know specific individuals, and that this isn't going to go away. But like if you're just like familiar enough with the Epstein case, you saw a bunch of memes in 2019 and you're like, "Oh man, let's find out a little bit more about this on Netflix."
Yeah.
It pretty much offers you like, "Oh, this is a closed case." I mean, admittedly not with like a satisfying resolution, but like the end where it's like talking about his suicide being like suicide being a last fuck you to his victims and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. It's just like that, it's so reductive, and like that
Well,
shit
and
like
to reduce any of the skepticism about the conditions surrounding his suicide as just conspiracy theories. That's
mm-hmm,
really all the lip service they give it, and I think I forget who it is that they're interviewing that talks about it, where they talk about the people working at the jail weren't looking, and the camera's fucked up, and they said like everything that could have gone wrong went wrong, and that rascally Epstein just got away with it because of these doughy jail officials. And do I assume that the people who work at the Manhattan Correctional Center are probably like doughy idiots? Yeah, probably a little bit, but like they mention in the doc, like, fucking El Chapo was there. Like, this isn't a place that people just die in all of a sudden. If they were really based, they would talk about, I want to say, it's Nicholas Tartaglione, the dude who is his cellmate, who, like, he denies it, but was suspected to have attacked Epstein a few weeks before his death in his cell. Um, yeah, and it just, like with the rest of it, it doesn't really interrogate how I'll say unprecedented his death was. It's kind of just presented as like a weird anomaly, and again, like you said, in that sort of true crime way, where it was kind of like watching like Making a Murder. It's very like glossy production value,
mm-hmm.
um and it's very much centered on the sort of lurid details of the assaults, which I don't think is useless or anything. Although, as you've said, even that part of it is kind of tainted by this doc. I guess we could go into a little bit more detail about the fact that Maria Farmer and a couple other people who are interviewed in this doc have since denounced it or said they regret participating in it. I know that Maria in particular was saying that like she didn't even really want to film it, and she was under the impression that it was like a low budget doc,
Mm-hmm.
and that she was kind of led on in a dishonest way about all of this. And I guess it's also worth mentioning, I forget the guy's name, but the author of the book that this doc is based on.
Oh, my mom loves his fucking like shitty books.
Did
Oh
he
fuck.
did she read
Who
the one he wrote with Bill Clinton?
no, but like he's just some fucking hack writer who I think like is probably like just a name in mass. Fuck. Why am I? God damn it.
I'll look it up. Let's see.
I'm blanking on this asshole's name.
They interview him in the thing.
Because like he like oh yeah, a friend of Bill Clinton's. Also another thing, they interview Alan Dershowitz, which like
Oh fuck yeah.
I get like that it's like important to interrogate someone like in their eyes potentially involved.
James Patterson. Sorry.
Oh
That's
yes,
his name.
yes, James Patterson.
Yeah.
Like that's like it's there's so many like red flags there where it's like you're not going to get the whole truth. And I mean with Dershowitz, like the perspective of the documentarians seem to be somewhat implicating Dershowitz. I mean, at the very least, they're condemning him for like representing Epstein and
Sure.
doing like the fullest extent to protect a global scale pedophile.
Sure.
But they like are like they dance around like saying that Dershowitz assaulted women. I think one of the girls might like directly.
One of the
name
girls
him.
does say that Alan Dershowitz sexually assaulted them, and then immediately right after that, they have Dershowitz say, "You know, I've never had sex in my entire life."
Oh yeah, even when he was underage, he didn't have sex with underage.
Yeah, even
Which
when
is
I
just,
was
like,
underage, I
which
didn't
is
have
just,
sex
like,
with anyone
the
underage.
fucking like, oh okay, cool, you didn't get pussy in high school. Like I don't like. It's like that definitely makes you not a pedophile. Like
I
whatever.
didn't even fuck 15-year-olds when I was 15. What do you think I'm doing?
But it's
Yeah, I
just,
think
like,
even just the inclusion of Dersh in this was a little weird.
because it's just like I don't know. It's more of that where it's like okay, it feels like controlled opposition in a way where it's like oh
Yeah.
we need to have like we can't like there are some minor pawns in the larger Epstein
Yes.
universe present there
Right.
like with Dersh, but it doesn't add up to much. It's
Well,
just
no.
like oh man, a shitty lawyer who people already fucking don't like is like probably like a allegedly a pedophile.
Well, that's exactly what I was thinking, is that I think one of the best ways I can think of to describe my issue with this doc is that it shows you some of the dots and doesn't connect any of them.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least not any ones other than the ones that you could find out just by like a cursory search of Epstein and like honestly, like I'm not even the biggest Epstein head either. Like I'm not some encyclopedia of Epstein knowledge like some people, but there was no new information in this for me.
Absolutely. I mean,
like,
the new information
you
for
could
me,
learn pretty much everything, maybe except for the exact details of the victim testimony. You could learn pretty much all of the details on Jeffrey Epstein's Wikipedia page.
Yeah, the survivor details were by far the newest information for me, and just because like I mean, probably not reading those transcripts out of just like they're graphic, and then also
Well, yeah, who sits back with a beer to read fucking sexual assault survivor testimony for 2 hours?
But I mean, like they with the inclusion of that, that's another thing where it's like I find the most value in it because it's like these victims are telling their stories, but too much of the doc is reveling in these lurid details of like sick. Like I mean, it's a similar issue that I had with like the Michael Jackson like doc that aired on HBO, where it's like a lot of it's like it's too fucking graphic of just like rape description and like just like. Not that I.
It's like trauma porn.
Yeah, it's that. It's like I don't think it's inherently wrong to be telling these details and like talking about these things, but the way the documentary sensationalizes it and like really revels in these creepy, evil moments. Well, simultaneously excluding like things that the victims are actually still fighting for after Epstein's death, I think is
Yes.
like pretty nefarious. I mean, it's like it's weird because I go back and forth between this being like a harmless surface level doc that for a lot of people could probably do more good than harm in terms of getting them aware about
Yeah.
Epstein, because like it's
Oh, if
actually
if
pretty.
you've never heard of him, then this is a decent like starter.
Because I was like, I was talking to my dad about this before I had started watching it. Because he is like, I mean, he's more of like a right wing kind of a guy, right wing in like the way a regular person can. Where I was like talking to him about the riots recently,
He's a
and
middle-aged man in America, so he's right-wing.
he was like, but no, it's like if you talk about it in non-explicit terms as like a working class guy, he's pretty much a socialist, but like
Right.
not, you don't say it that way.
Right.
It's like fine. But yeah, he was talking about the Epstein doc, and it was like, oh, it was good. He has this like introductory like stuff, and I think it's good. It gets more like people who are only familiar with the memes and like surface level gets in deep. But once you do that sort of legwork and find out that there's more at play there, it's kind of pretty horrifying, the documentary.
Yeah, yeah. No, I would agree. And like I said, it presents a lot of the dots and doesn't connect them. And I think the reason why they're able to sort of even though I don't honestly think that it's, you know, that it's still pretty forgiving or neutral about it, but I think one of the only reasons that they can sort of implicate Alan Dershowitz is because nobody gives a fuck about Alan Dershowitz. Like, he isn't really like at the levers of power, at least not anymore, as much as he may have been.
Hmm.
And he, both with this doc and in like the news coverage, he and like Prince Andrew are a couple of the characters in the Epstein world where like the evidence is clear enough and they're not powerful enough that, you know, the people pulling the strings have pretty much decided like they can take the fall, like they can
Hmm.
get fucked for this as long as the actual thing stays in place. And that's kind of like I said, I think this is sort of a catch and release for people who may think like, oh, I think there might be something more going on with this case. And that's why I think if you do have even a cursory understanding of who Epstein is and about his death in particular, I feel like most people will probably come away from this doc wanting more information.
Hmm. I mean, the thing is, I was thinking that as well, watching it at points. But there's like the documentary very much so invites you to stick with your own reading of the material. Like
Yeah.
if you go into this as like a person who's like, okay, like the Epstein stuff is weird and like fucked up and creepy, but like the guy killed himself. It's like there are evil people out there. If you're going in with that perspective, you completely are like can feel comfortable in that.
Right.
But like if you're like on the more conspiratorial end, like the doc allows you to have it both ways in that
Mm-hmm.
respect, where it's like, oh, you can buy into there's a broader sense of the conspiracy, because it does also, to give a little bit more credit, the Ghislaine Maxwell stuff, it
Yes.
mentions like it does a little bit of her background that I think is interesting, and also really like focuses on her role in all of this stuff. But I mean, I guess it could have done a little bit more in
They
like
could
the
have talked
current.
about Robert Maxwell and the boat,
Yeah, yeah.
because that's a whole. I mean, that was one of those details about the Epstein stuff that when I found out about it, I turned into the Mr. Krabs meme, where the world was spinning around me. Because like I don't remember all the details, but it was Robert Maxwell. Her father was, I don't know if he was with Mossad, but he was like an intelligence agent
Hmm.
of some variety, and he was pushed off. Well, he jumped off one of his boats, which I believe now belongs to Donald Trump. Um, and I think it was the boat that was called Ghislaine, and that's why she was named that. Uh, there's a lot of stuff with that, but but yeah, I do think they go into a little bit of detail with Maxwell, and the fact that they are this openly like implicating her in things just strengthens my assumption that she's dead.
Hmm.
Or will never be held to real account. I honestly have no fucking idea
Yeah,
what
I don't
happened to
think.
her.
I mean, if she is dead, or whatnot, I think there's no chance of us seeing her ever again. I mean,
Nope.
I think like the
She might as
Epstein.
well be dead, in other
Yeah,
words. Like, it really
uh,
wouldn't make much of a difference.
Epstein as a whole, like again, I mean, what I said at the beginning is like kind of like a fluke or a glitch in the system. We
Right.
were able to see for one fleeting moment, like have the suspicions confirmed that the ruling class is a bunch of evil dogs that, like, for whatever reason, will are doing something like and getting away with it.
Yeah, I just thought of the perfect analogy. Um, so the documentary wants to treat Epstein like the masked leader of the sex cult in Eyes Wide Shut when he's really the friend that tells Tom Cruise about it. And Tom
Exactly.
Cruise is us.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference. Um, is that it wants to it the documentary sets it up as this is Epstein's thing that he like created for his own
Hmm.
uh pleasure. And like, don't get me wrong, obviously Epstein as a person, like, I mean, I can't speak to what his motivations are, who knows, but I think it's pretty, you know, we can all agree that he was a sick person who liked doing what he did.
Hmm.
Um, and I mean, more than one of his victims have specifically said that he would say, like, "Oh, I own the Palm Beach Police Department. They're never gonna find out, and if they do, I'll get away with it." So, there was no misunderstanding about what was happening. Um, but that's not what it was. I mean, if we're being honest, all that shit is still happening. Um, like, I don't think you could possibly. I mean, maybe now they can't go to their favorite island.
Yeah, no, but
They
it's just
can't
like
go to the
some.
temple anymore.
I mean, some other rich fuck is like honestly like just gonna snap up Little St. James.
Yeah,
There are other pedophile islands that
yeah.
we don't know
Who's gonna
about,
be the new
and
Santa Claus now that Epstein
hmm
died? Who's gonna take up the mantle? Because that's what I assume it is. I assume that Epstein, maybe he wasn't the first, but he won't be
hmm
the last. Just a random dude who, like, it's like the Dalai Lama. Just at birth, they pick this random dude who's, like, in the perfect confluence of conditions. They find out about this dude who's teaching math at a high school, and they're like, oh, he fucks kids. He's good at math, so we could say that he's, like, a brilliant investor or whatever. And
hmm
because, in the 70s and 80s, you didn't were and Epstein couldn't exist before like 50 years ago in the way that he existed in terms of how he got his money, which was
hmm
by not doing anything. It wasn't work. It wasn't selling anything. Nobody that knew him can even describe what he did. So yeah.
and like the sheer amount of like the amount of like victims trafficked, it's like there's no way a person could hold down like a legitimate full-time job and also be running this scale of a ring. Oh, that
Unless
I
his job was the ring.
yeah, exactly. And this reminds me of, I mean, very loosely, but I as something ignited in my mind that I wanted to
Right.
mention it. The inclusion of the reporter Vicky Ward, who
Oh yeah,
did
that's a big
the
detail.
the initial like Variety piece. She had come forward to Variety with a piece that was supposed to be like a society thing about Epstein, and she was apparently one of the first people who had found out like more like the uh fuck Maria Farmer stuff.
Yeah.
She had like found out stuff about
Both of
that.
the farmer girls.
yeah, the general like Epstein is like up to a lot of bad things. But
Yes.
like Maria Farmer has explicitly named Vicky Ward as being someone who has like shut her out. And
Mm-hmm.
like after like Vicky Ward, I think both of the farmer girls went to her to like sort of tell their stories because it was like they're going to like you're finally going to be able to see some justice for this, and ultimately Ward just sort of shut them out, said that like um something with the FBI, that like she was going to go to the FBI, and ultimately stood to profit more off of their stories while being like fucking friends with Ghislaine Maxwell.
Yeah,
Like
that
that's
was the
something
big
they neglect to
detail.
mention.
Yeah, you sent me that, and maybe I'll put it in the description or something. That clip, of I was it on Whitney Webb's show or who was it? What was it
Uh
on with the Maria
I'm
Farmer
not
clip?
I don't know exactly. Maria Farmer has been making her rounds. Like I saw her.
Yeah,
I mean, the first I had seen was Whitney Webb, who is a reporter doing, I think, the best and most thorough Epstein work, and of course is like an independent and an outsider because of her like legitimate investigative journalism.
yeah.
Uh, but she was playing clips from an interview she did with Maria Farmer on Tim Dillon's show. But on True Anon, Maria Farmer essentially goes over a lot of the exact same things in like an hour long interview.
Yeah,
Uh,
but yeah, I listened to that, and she says that like Vicky Ward is a snake, that she was talking about it over drinks with Ghislaine Maxwell, which makes sense that they're friends. They're both sort of like British socialites, or were,
mhm.
um, and yeah. So that and Vicky Ward is like one of the main framers of the story. It's not just that she's included in this doc. She is the person who opens the doc and who introduces us to the victims. And
Yeah.
her Vanity Fair story, which for people who don't know what it was, is that by her account, she wanted to go to print with a lot more details. The Vanity Fair editor, Graydon Carter, essentially said that they can't run that. It doesn't meet their legal standards or whatever. Apparently, it's kind of dog shit that it's all Graydon Carter's fault or whatever. Apparently, like
Hmm.
you said, Vicky Ward found out that she stood to profit more from having this sort of more tepid and milquetoast feature on Epstein, which I don't know if it even mentions the victims at all, or at the very least does not go. It does not share the information that was shared with Vicky Ward. Um, yeah, that was all. It was all very strange.
I mean, it lends to like I mean, conceivably, the documentarians, when interviewing Maria Farmer, have like, I mean, I don't know what footage has been left on the cutting room floor and what hasn't or whatever, but
Apparently, a
like,
lot of her telling them that she doesn't want to film it.
uh, but like, in doing like the investigation that you need to make a 4-part mini series, at some point I'm sure they encounter from one of the victims that or like in any like good investigation or research you would come across the point, maybe Vicky Ward isn't the most reliable source on this, and that's what just sort of makes this feel like what you were saying about like, oh, the neat little like this is the open and shut Epstein stuff, because it's like you have Vicky Ward clearly as someone who is like meant to like suppress all this and like keep information from getting out, being one of the main people framing this story for us.
Well, that's what makes me think this whole thing is an op.
Yeah.
Again, a catch and kill operation for anyone who may think that, maybe this goes a little bit deeper than just one man wanting to fulfill his sick fantasies and having the means to do so by some confluence of luck or whatever. And, other powerful, famous people are implicated in it that maybe have a similar set of sick desires. They also mentioned the fact that he is filming everything in all of these properties, and it's most likely used not only probably for his own personal pleasure, but for blackmail. And that's not even not true that that's what it's for. But I feel like they
it's
communicated...
not for Epstein's own personal gain.
Right. No, they communicated in a way where it's like, well, Epstein's doing this so that if any of the powerful people who, come to his island, whether or not they intend to have sex with children, they, he has dirt on them now. So that's how it stays quiet, is because he has the evidence. And it's like, well, but if he wasn't integral to something, and there were people who were more powerful than him who he had implicated in it, then they would get rid of him. And, I mean, you could argue that they have. I mean, that's kind of the main reason for the conspiratorial thinking around his death, is that he was about to be on trial. And, I mean, Virginia and the Farmer Girls, they've named dozens and dozens of people who are prominent politicians, celebrities, military, intelligence, finance. I mean, it really permeates like almost every aspect of, modern imperial power and everything. But the doc doesn't seem interested in exploring that, because obviously, if you go down that road, you get to the conclusion that, you and I have been at for a while now, which is that, either the functioning of all government, military, intelligence, finance, what have you, is a front to, basically procure and cover up the trafficking of young women and girls for the elite, or the other way around, that they all want to do this, and so they use these sort of structures of power to do this and to keep it hidden. I don't know. I just don't... There are so many things in the doc where, and maybe it's just because there's stuff that I know that the doc doesn't get into, but I just feel like, that's why I say that I feel like most people will probably come away from it wanting more information, if they went into it with any inkling of what is weird about Epstein's case. Because there are so many things that the doc presents, that when you put them next to each other, you kind of can't come to any other conclusion than what I just said. But they can't have it be that conclusion.
I mean, it's weird that this doc is called Jeffrey Epstein Filthy Rich, one dog shit title.
That's really bad.
Could just be Jeffrey Epstein pedophile, but in something that explicitly is
or just filthy rich.
Yeah, just the filthy rich aspect of it is hardly hit on at all, in something that implicates a lot of wealthy people, talks about Epstein, Epstein being able to get away with this because of his amount of money and connections and stuff like that. The doc never makes any implications that money and power kind of lead to this, that it's that's sort of the breeding ground for something that has this title that has the air of, oh man, it's the power and money there that lends to this lifestyle. It's yeah, of course, that's how he's able to get away with it, but not that type of evil is inherent to their being billionaires.
Well, yeah. Well, that's I mean, we've already said it, but it really, the downfall is making it about just Jeffrey Epstein, and it does, like you just said, it does say, he was able to get away with it because of his money and his connections and power, but it doesn't interrogate that for anybody else that's implicated. Okay, well then by that measure, Bill Clinton is the same way. Donald Trump is the same way. Prince Andrew is the same way. Like, they also have money and power and connections. I mean, fucking Bill Clinton certainly does.
Yeah, and it's like they're like.
So why is that? It doesn't have any interest in going further than that.
It keeps the nice illusion of like the good billionaires like Bill Gates
Right.
and whatever bullshit, where it's like, oh,
Who also hung out with Epstein.
Yeah, of course. It's like you get to keep the illusion that there are some people with absurd amounts of money like this that for some fucking way, despite everyone else in their club being like a sex creep fucking weirdo, it's like, no, it's not money. That is nothing. That only allows them to do this.
That's
that
the thing.
has nothing to do with why they do it.
Right. That's what I'm saying is about, like, there are so many things, there's so many details in this that when you hear them, I feel like you can't help but, keep, like, take another step further because, like, they mention that, Epstein had connections to Bill Clinton, and they don't really go into it much, but they do very briefly mention how he was, like, big in like academia as well, which I think is an under talked about part of the Epstein legacy, is how he was like buddies with a bunch of MIT scientists, and in the months before his arrest and death was talking to them about how they could freeze his cum so that they could make a master race of pedophiles, I guess. Which really gets at, and I know I'm not the first person to make this observation, and this is kind of an aside, that it is really funny that at the end of the day, Epstein's just a dumb guy. Like, Epstein is just another, like, dumb dude who was like, oh, freeze my cock. Like, then everyone will be as smart and cool as me. But they say, like, yeah, he had connections to Bill Clinton, he had connections to Prince Andrew, but they never say, well, why? Why were they hanging out? Why do all of these rich, powerful people all have this perverse common interest?
I mean, especially, like, it's like they talk about only for, like, a little snippet. It's like upon Epstein's prison release, they're like, oh, man, tons of famous people were there, like Woody Allen, like Kevin Spacey. Like, they named the usual suspects, if you will, of Hollywood rapes.
All the people that we've all just agreed are rapists.
But, like, beyond that, it's like there are other wealthy, famous people who, like, were there and throughout the course of Epstein's life until his death, hung out with him, who knew, like, if you knew Jeffrey Epstein socially, there is without a doubt in my mind, this was not hidden from you. And you were aware that a man had a sex dungeon and, like, was doing this. And it's like, there's no normal person has a friend who they're just like, well, fuck, they were, like, fucking kids in their basement for, like, months and, like, stuff like
Except
that.
the basement was a private island that you've been to.
But it's cool. We're still friends. Like, that doesn't, like, they had underage prostitutes, but, like, some things you really look past for friendship. It's just, like, it's not fucking normal. And again, channeling through the media, the fucking elites are trying to, like, get us to buy, like, oh, everything is fine. Like, the things that we're doing, it's all cool.
This
like,
bad apple
happen. Yeah.
Right. Well, again, they try to make it like a Weinstein story because obviously tons of people in Hollywood knew what was going on with Weinstein, or at least had heard, rumors or whatever, or at least that's how they classify it, and still hung out with him, worked with him. But that makes more sense to me because that is, he's a producer and the leader of a film distribution company. Like, there's a reason that, like, even if you're not the kind of sick Hollywood fuck that fucks kids or rapes people in general, that you would be okay with being with someone who or suspect might be, because there's some value, like, they are good for your career. Like, it's good for them to be in your life. What does Woody Allen or Donald Trump or Prince Andrew have anything to gain from this random fucker in Florida, if not just the common interest of fucking kids. Like, and again, the doc doesn't want to take it that one step further and go, why did they know each other? Because I think they even say in the doc, like, if you are, if you're not a young girl and you are, like, talking with Jeffrey Epstein socially, you absolutely know who he was and what is going on.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, and then you give me a list of names of people who are still fucking walking around right now who fit that description, and I'm not supposed to want to know more about that?
Yeah, it's like, oh man, Epstein is caught. The kid fucking stops. It's like, oh shit, we're shutting down the island.
No,
Like we
absolutely.
had,
They
we had a
probably.
good run while we lasted, but
I
like
I
that's it.
guarantee you, back in August of 2019, they all the pedophile elites all gathered in whatever conclave, and it was like they voted for the Pope. They got the white smoke, and they picked who the next person would be. Who would be, and it's probably just some fuck at like Goldman Sachs that no one's ever heard of, and just like 2 years from now he'll be like, I'm looking into investment opportunities in the Caribbean, and he buys Little St. James and just quietly, and like, and some other willing patsy like Les Wexner gets involved and is like his handler or whatever. Yeah, nah, it leaves a very strange taste in my mouth. And as soon as I found out, during the first episode, I was just like looking into the doc a little bit. And like, first of all, the first thing I saw was Maria Farmer saying like Vicky Ward is a snake, and like this documentary is horseshit or whatever. So I was like, that's kind of a red flag. And then the other big one was when I looked at what's his face Patterson. And I was like, it sounds familiar. Who is he? And he wrote a fucking book with Bill Clinton like a year ago. And I was like, oh, well, this is weird. How are you gonna have an expose, a tell-all about Jeffrey Epstein, and it's produced by like a best buddy of one of the most esteemed guests of Little St. James. I do think, though, if any of the people who have been like confirmed that they're on the Epstein flight logs, if there's any rich person who I think is genuinely just like someone who was caught in the crosshairs because they thought it would be good for their career, it's probably Chris Tucker.
I don't know, man.
But
Maybe.
I don't know. I'm just saying. Out of the people,
there are a lot
out
of
the people that I've seen,
book. Yeah,
that's true. But of all the people that I've seen in there, if there's one person that I would believe it if we found out that like, oh yeah, he was just along for the ride.
This is gonna get me the next Rush Hour movie.
Yeah, he was like, I got this meeting with Bill. And we're gonna see what we can do about Rush Hour 4. Where what was that other fucking movie with Chris Tucker? Oh, he's we're gonna make the sequel to Friday, and we're shooting it on this island or whatever. Like, if anyone in the Black Book is like the Tom Cruise of Eyes Wide Shut of this case, I feel like Chris Tucker would be a pretty understandable one. But it also wouldn't surprise me at all if we found out like, no, he loves fucking kids like all the other ones. So let's do some closing thoughts. What's your sort of just general feelings about this? Your wrap up of your what word am I thinking of? Whatever. Fucking.
I mean, I feel like overall we've like pretty much said directly like how I feel. Like it's you. I don't want to say this is good. I think it's useful.
Sure.
Like if you are looking for a way to find more information about Epstein, like this is a good start. And also like finding more information that like is like pretty contradictory and like reveals like a lot of the nature of the case through just like the fact that this documentary in and of itself is filled with lies. But like more to it than that. I don't know. It's like pretty uninteresting on like a formal level. It's one of those. It's classic zone out TV. I've
Yeah.
been playing Zelda a lot recently on my DS, and I
Which
was playing
Zelda?
that while it was a Link Between Worlds.
That's a good
Um,
game. It doesn't
yeah.
matter. I wanted to know though.
But no, it is a good game. But I was playing it while I was watching because it was just like it's just like Talking Heads interviews with I mean occasionally some of like seeing the especially in the Prince Andrew stuff, seeing like the actual like photographs of like her with Andrew and Ghislaine and Epstein
Yeah.
is like, yeah, this is pretty damning evidence. Um, but other
Not
than
to
that,
Andrew, it isn't.
it's just like it's a nice way to get like some of the information pretty concisely. But other than that, it has a lot of ethical issues where it's like doing harm to the victims actively. And if you just want to take it at face value, don't watch it. But if you like, or if you're familiar with it, then I would say just skip it.
Yeah.
But yeah, not, I don't know. It has a value.
Yeah, I won't say it's completely worthless either, but I will say, like I said before, if you're already familiar with like the basics, like what we talked about in the first few minutes of the video about Epstein, you're not really gonna be, your mind is not gonna be blown by this. This is, I feel like this is how like a lot of moms are gonna learn about Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, it's like a
Um,
for dummies book about Jeffrey Epstein.
yes, yes, exactly. Um, yeah, yeah. I
A
mean,
chicken soup for the Jeffrey Epstein soul.
yeah, the complete idiot's guide to Jeffrey Epstein. Um, yeah, no, I mean, I feel like we've pretty much said it's good for opening and introductory information, but please, if you are actually like interested in understanding all that shit, I would not make this your last source of information about it. Um, or like the extent to which you look into it. And just as kind of a side note, we talked about how it's kind of inappropriate for this doc to take on the sort of Netflix true crime aesthetic, where it has. I don't know why I really didn't like the opening title sequence for this, because it's just one of those like, it's like a shadowy man figure walking up a bridge made of money or something.
I mean, it's just
Um,
trivializing like all of it. It just makes it seem like it's
right.
fucking entertainment. It's like there shouldn't be. It's not like a television show. It's not the Jeffrey Epstein television show. That's not what
Right.
I like. That shouldn't fucking be a thing.
Right. Yeah, no, it's but just in general, I really haven't enjoyed the proliferation of Netflix true crime documentary series. I don't
Hmm.
mind true crime as a genre. Like, I don't think it's bad. Um but I think this doc all like suffers from something that I think a lot of Netflix miniseries do, which is it didn't need to be as long as it is.
Hmm.
Um, because like I said, I mean, a good like 2 hours of this is just like very graphic and detailed descriptions of sexual assault, and I don't think that that is like necessarily inherently a bad thing, but I feel like it's very intentional to not only pad this out, but also to like avoid any sort of deeper questions. Uh, and like, I mean, I don't want to come off callous about, like forefronting the victims. I don't think that's a bad thing to do, but I think it is kind of bad when, as we've said, the victims themselves have a lot of problems with how the stock was made, and what's in it. Um, and I don't know. It's a weird trend, and I feel like this is just like the again reason I think it's an op is because it's this very trendy and very glossy treatment of this material, of this subject matter, um and treats it basically in a way where it's like this dastardly man did this and built this all by himself and implicated a bunch of powerful people in it and did all these horrible things, and then the motherfucker got away with it in the end, and way she goes, you know? And it's kind of satisfied to just leave it at that. And I feel like that's just very irresponsible and kind of insulting to the victims. Who, you know, yeah, like we said, again, have major problems with it. I don't necessarily think that it's like a net negative per se. I don't think it's done like irreparable harm to, their plight, their, fight for justice, really. But it certainly has not advanced that goal very much, if at all.
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly.
But I think we're gonna end it off there. I think we've basically said all we need to. I know this is kind of random, by the way, for the channel. I've never really done anything like this, but there's no movies coming out, and I don't have anything to do. So, and this came out, and I was watching it, and we were talking about it might be a fun thing to talk a little bit about.
No, it was a lot of fun. I don't do video, and it's nice to chat with my dear friend about something. Both I know when the Epstein stuff was happening last year, we were both peak Epstein brain ourselves, and like, how little we knew about how fucked up and shitty the world would become. But
honestly, it's so fucked that I look back on that summer and it almost feels quaint. When I was like, oh, remember when I was just sitting at home and listening to podcasts about Jeffrey Epstein, like, oh man, back when life was simple, am I right? Man. Yeah. So I hope we're all good and black pilled now, and watch this or don't. It's your call, really. And thank you, JT, for chilling out with me and talking with me for a little bit.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And that's all from us for now. So I'll see y'all next time.